And on a separate issue, free speech, your Vice President, Vance, said that free speech is under attack in the UK. Do you agree with him? And Prime Minister, we saw the dismissal of a very well-known chat show host in America last night, Mr. Kimmel. Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, on the question of Charlie Kirk, can I just express how shocking that is, I think, to everybody who believes in free speech and in democracy. It sent shockwaves through the world. And I know that he was a friend of the president, and I reached out straight away to the president because I understood how impactful it'd be on him and his family. And we all need to be absolutely clear about that. Whatever our political views, it is shocking and is to be condemned. On free speech, not much to add to the answer I gave earlier. This country's had free speech for a very, very long time. It is part of who we are as a country, and it is the values that we fought for. We fought for it during the Second World War alongside each other. So we need no reminding of the importance of free speech in this country. Thank you, Robert. And I go to Beth for the final question, please. Beth.
Free speech isn't tested when you like the speaker. It's tested when you don't. At a joint presser in London, the president framed a late-night host's removal as justified bad ratings, while the prime minister rushed to reaffirm Britain's tradition of open debate. Stick with me as we follow that thread through sanctions talk, Ukraine, and the CDC fallout. Hit subscribe, smash like, and say free speech matters in the comments to boost the signal. The scene opens with familiar stakes and familiar hedging. On hostages, the president repeats he wants them all back at once, not piecemeal. It's a headline line, spare on detail. And it sets a pattern for the night. Declare the goal, avoid the plan. Then comes the question that blows the lid off the gilded calm. A reporter asks about free speech after his vice president claims it's under attack in Britain, and about the high-profile dismissal of late-night host Jimmy Kimmel in the US. The president doesn't touch the principle. He goes straight to the person. Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings, he says, adding that Kimmel said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk, and calling Kimmel not a talented person. It's not a defense of speech, it's a justification for a critic losing his microphone. The message between the lines, when critics lose platforms, it's meritocracy, not suppression. The Prime Minister steps to the mic next, and in that careful Westminster cadence says the quiet part about values out loud. He calls what happened to Kirk shocking for those who believe in free speech and democracy, says he reached out to the president immediately, and then broadens it. The UK has had free speech for a very, very long time. It's who we are, we fought for it in the Second World War. It's the sort of statement you make when the air needs clearing, both for allies abroad and for citizens at home.
In a world saturated with information, finding the truth requires unwavering dedication and independent voices. America Facticity stands as a beacon for factual, unbiased reporting, delivering the stories that truly matter. Join our membership for just $9 a month. Your support helps us grow our team and create even better content. Find the link in the description below.
What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed, and I made a decision about it, and that's very clear. On the question of the pressure on Putin and on Russia, which is obviously really important, look, I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are one or two countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place a number of times, working across Europe and with the United States. And, of course, we must, and we are, making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position now, because one of my long concerns here has been that whilst we talk about a ceasefire, and we all want a ceasefire, And we talk about what might happen after a ceasefire. We mustn't forget that Ukraine needs our support now. And we've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue to supply them with what they need in order to fight this war, which, of course...
If those were the only minutes we got, they'd be enough to sketch the fault line. One leader personalizes and dismisses, the other re-anchors in principle. But the press kept pressing. Sky News' Beth Rigby asks the question that haunts every sanctions regime. The president is threatening to squeeze Russia by sanctioning its oil if NATO countries stop buying it. Does the UK agree? And is that what will finally pressure Putin? She adds the uncomfortable follow-up. If Putin is escalating, firing drones into NATO airspace and letting you down, was it a mistake to invite him to Alaska? Do you regret it? And then a domestic political grenade. Was it right for Lord Mandelson to lose his ambassador role over historic links to Epstein? The president punts on Mandelson, I don't know him, and tosses to the PM. The prime minister answers crisply, new information surfaced last week, the decision was made. That's that. On Russia, he acknowledges what European energy ministers whisper. Some countries are still too dependent on Russian energy. The UK, he notes, is effectively at zero, but others need to look again. There's no single silver bullet. Sanctions must be broad and sustained, aligned with the US, and paired with something too many speeches skip. Actual, continuing support to Ukraine so it's strong now, not just on paper in some future ceasefire. It's a subtle but crucial pivot. Pressure Moscow, yes, but don't starve Kyiv while you do it. Back in the States, the free speech question keeps echoing because it isn't only about a talk show. After the presser, Democratic Senator Angela Alsobrooks goes on air and calls this a five-alarm fire. She points to the FCC chair's comments that track with the administration's media crusade and says, bluntly, there's no longer even a pretense of subtlety. Whether you like Jimmy Kimmel is beside the point, she argues. The First Amendment isn't partisan. When government actors cheer or pressure deplatforming, when they use state machinery to chill expression, that's not culture war. That's constitutional. And the crackdown list doesn't stop at television.
Speech, we heard President Trump in that news conference talk about Jimmy Kimmel's show being pulled from the air, slamming him as not having talent. Between that and what we heard from the FCC chair this morning, and they're not even trying to subtly influence media companies right now. It's blatant. Are you surprised they're doing this all out in the open?
Well, you know what? I'm not surprised because the FCC chair was one of the authors of Project 25. And what we know is that this is a five-alarm fire. And I hope that every American watching understands clearly what we are seeing. The First Amendment in our country is sacrosanct. It is the basis of our country. And having the right to freely speak is a basic right. It is not partisan either. It is not partisan. But this is a five-alarm fire. It is deeply concerning to me and ought to be to every single person watching the perilous course that we are on. We didn't have to agree with what Jimmy Kimmel said, but we have a right in this country to speak freely. And having the government sanction what we say, to censor what we say, to control what we say is a very dangerous precedent. This is a five-alarm fire.
The president, she notes, says he's designating Antifa a terrorist organization, an announcement that raises practical and legal questions, given Antifa isn't a formal group with membership roles, leadership, or a bank account you can freeze. At the same time, a senior advisor claims DOJ will hunt which NGOs are paying for violence, a phrasing elastic enough to stretch over ordinary protest coordination. Pair that with the White House leaning on media companies, and you get the picture the senator draws. A government increasingly comfortable using the levers of power against foes, critics, and inconvenient narratives. If you're still with me and want this analysis reaching beyond our bubble, take a second to share this video with one friend who follows the news and drop your take in the comments. Is this principled concern about media standards or a purge dressed up as programming decisions? Your voice helps set the tone in this community. What makes Alsobrooks' five-alarm warning hit harder is how it connects to another front, public health. You heard it in her list: firings of career scientists, the undoing of vaccination infrastructure, the elevation of activists to roles that set national health guidance. She cites the HELP committee hearing with the former CDC director and the agency's ex-chief medical officer, where both testified they were pressed to pre-approve vaccine recommendations sight unseen and to purge experts who wouldn't bend. Their core claim wasn't rhetorical. If you sideline data and rush ideology into the gap, preventable disease returns. You don't need to agree with every past CDC call to understand how brittle a system becomes when expertise is replaced with loyalty tests. That brittleness shows up in the language too. Listen to the president's answer again about Kimmel. It isn't, networks should program as they see fit, or even, I don't like the guy. It's a mini indictment of a critic's talent and a reminder that he spoke ill of a presidential ally. It reads as justification. And when a head of government starts justifying which critics should disappear from major platforms, even as his administration leans on outlets, we don't have to guess at the downstream incentives in boardrooms and newsrooms. The prime minister clearly senses the stakes. You can hear it in the way he keeps planting flags. Britain fought for speech. We'll work with Europe and the US on Russia. We'll stand by Ukraine now, not just on the day of a ceasefire. It's what allies do when domestic politics in one capital starts wobbling pillars that hold up more than one house.
Something else that was touched on during that news conference was what appears to be a broader crackdown here at home. The president saying he's designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. What questions do you have about that?
Well, you know, that one, to be honest with you, I hadn't heard that bit of news. We're in an environment now where the news is evolving by the second. But again, going back to what you have mentioned, saying that but free speech is very important to our country, and making sure that we are not rolling back the constitutional rights that we all have in this country is really important.
Yeah, let's talk about this bigger picture about how the Trump administration appears to be going after its critics. The White House has applied pressure on a slew of media companies. Stephen Miller said the DOJ will now look into which liberal groups and NGOs are, quote, paying for violence, as he described it. What impact does this have on America's democratic system?
Well, our democratic system is under attack right now. It really is. And this witch hunt that we have seen everywhere, from the firing of the federal employees, the removal of scientists at HHS who disagree with the secretary there, the undoing of the public health system in our country. We now are seeing that we are the more difficult access for children to vaccinations, and for those who need a distrust of science and scientists. This, again, is a very perilous course that we're on. And this witch hunt to remove and punish enemies, to silence people, is one that our country will pay for decades to come. And again, it is a 5-alarm fire. I am deeply concerned about it. It is deeply un-American at its core. And again, it goes against the constitutional principles upon which our country was built. And it not only harms us here domestically, but it harms us internationally. Harms our reputation, harms us as a strength and a power, and as a moral country. I think that we ought to really be concerned about punishing, and the vindictiveness that we are seeing and the cruelty is, I think, going to mark our country. I am concerned for generations to come.
Value statements aren't filler, they're policy signals. There's also the global audience. Autocrats and would-be autocrats listen for permission structures. If Washington signals that bad ratings is the public-facing fig leaf for weeding out sharp-tongued comedians, don't be surprised when leaders elsewhere cite viewer fatigue while muzzling independent journalists. That's not alarmism, it's how norms spread. Let's pull back to the core questions viewers have been asking me since the clip aired. Is this about taste or power? If a host goes after your friends and your politics, are you entitled to cheer when the host disappears? Sure. But when you're the government, your cheers sound like policy. If you defend the removal as a private business call while simultaneously leaning on companies across the media ecosystem, that's not taste. That's pressure. Is free speech under attack in Britain, as the vice president claimed? The prime minister's response was twofold. Rhetorically, a firm no. Practically, a reassurance. Britain's speech tradition is deep. But he also knows cases like protest restrictions and policing decisions are under scrutiny at home. That's why you heard him tie speech to wartime sacrifices. It's a way to remind Britons and allies that principles outlast governments. Was it a mistake to invite Putin to Alaska? The president says no. The PM implies the only invitations that matter now are to a negotiating table constructed from leverage. And leverage doesn't materialize from speeches, it comes from energy policy, sanctions that actually bite, and Ukrainian strength measured in ammunition and air defenses, not in adjectives. What about the Mandelson-Epstein decision? The PM's answer was deliberately curt. New information came in after appointment, the call was made. In a day where process often gets bulldozed by vibes, that was a rare, crisp example of how you handle reputational risk in public service. And back home, how real is the 5-alarm fire? Start with what's on the record. Senior officials publicly musing about what shows should or shouldn't exist. The talk of terror designations for amorphous enemies, promises to put NGOs that support dissent under federal microscopes. A health department that, by sworn testimony, pressured its top scientists to play politics with vaccine schedules. You don't need to be a constitutional lawyer to see the pattern. Delegitimize critics, criminalize opponents, bureaucratize revenge. It's the authoritarian toolkit in plain English.
You keep calling it a 5-alarm fire. What is it specifically you're most concerned about?
Well, you know what? Let us count the ways. I'm concerned that when we think about the public health system being dismantled, that we're going to see a resurgence of diseases that we have long eliminated. The measles that will kill our children, hepatitis. We have this quack guy, Aaron Siri, who HHS Secretary Kennedy, who wants to eliminate the polio vaccine. These are people who are being given credibility, and I think we'll see a resurgence of illness and death. When we talk about free speech, I think, again, we have to be very careful when we talk about really eliminating the First Amendment right that we enjoy, how it will really make us fall as a democratic superpower in the world. And again, hurts us not only domestically, divides us, but it makes us less safe here and makes us less safe across the world.
I do want to ask you about that hearing you were a part of yesterday with the former CDC director and the former chief medical officer. When you asked about Secretary Kennedy's leadership at HHS, Dr. Howery, the former chief medical officer, said she thought he should resign. Did that hearing move the needle among your Republican colleagues at all related to Kennedy's leadership?
Well, I hope it has. I've been calling for Secretary Kennedy to be fired or resign. I don't care which one, whichever comes first, for months now. And we see that by day, the damage that he's doing to our health system is increasing. We now see that Dr. Howery and, of course, the former director of CDC, Dr. Monterez, who, by the way, the panel of senators who confirmed her said she was unimpeachable in her credibility. She came out and said that she was forced, that she was urged to agree with vaccine recommendations without seeing them, and that she believes that people are going to get sick and going to die because of the direction that the secretary has taken us. And so, both of them together, and this is a Republican who has said this. So I hope that my colleagues on the other end of the aisle will do more than express concerns about the dangerous rhetoric, the firing of scientists, the sowing distrust, causing parents to distrust the health system in our country. I hope they do more than say how concerned they are about it. This is time for us to act. It is not a partisan issue. Children dying is not a partisan issue. Dying of measles, of hepatitis, of polio, of diseases that they should not be sick or die from. This is not partisan. This is a basic moral issue. And it is one that we all must act against.
Some will argue this is just fighting back against a hostile media. Let's be honest, media criticism is fair game. Leaning on companies with regulatory power in your back pocket isn't. Comedy that punches you in the jaw, respond on the merits, go on the show, or ignore it. But once the state starts celebrating silences and hunting for the next, it stops being about comedy at all. The public health tie-in may be the most consequential, because viruses don't care what team you're on. Also, Brooks lists the stakes with grim clarity. Measles we thought we'd left in the rear view, hepatitis that maims, polio we read about in history books. In hearings, 2 former CDC leaders warn, replace evidence with ideology, and you'll watch those names crawl back into pediatric charts. You don't need to adore every vaccine guideline to grasp the larger point. A society that treats scientists as enemies and data as disloyal will get sicker. It just will. At Windsor, amid golden ceilings and careful choreography, the PM tried to keep the alliance story on rails. Shared sacrifice, shared speech tradition, shared front against Russian aggression. That story only works if both sides keep faith with the same fundamentals. It's hard to champion dissidents abroad while deriding satirists at home. It's hard to urge Europe off Russian energy while flirting with performative isolationism. And it's impossible to lead the free world if your citizens come to believe free is just a slogan you dust off for state dinners. So where does this go? Watch for 3 things. First, do the words harden into policy? If regulatory agencies start acting on political gripes, We'll see it in enforcement patterns, license fights, and merger approvals. Second, does Congress wake up? Hearings are one thing, subpoenas and statutes are another. And third, do citizens care enough to defend people they don't like? Free speech protections are easiest to abandon when the target is someone who irritates you. That's when you need them most. If this analysis is useful, make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell so you don't miss the next breakdown. And tell me below, what crossed the line for you? Celebrating a critic's firing, the terror label talk, or the pressure campaign on media? I read every top-level comment. In the end, Windsor offered a strange split screen. Opulence and pageantry on one side, and on the other, a stark debate about who gets to speak, who gets punished, and who decides. The president's answers told us he's comfortable personalizing what should be principle. The prime minister's answers told us he knows how that looks to allies. And the senator's answers told us what it could cost us: our health, our credibility, our ability to argue without asking permission first. Free speech is messy. It protects monologues you'll replay and monologues you'll mute. But democracies grow brittle in silence. If we're serious about the world we say we lead, then we have to be serious about the freedoms we tout, especially when they're aimed at us. If you value straight, unvarnished coverage and want to keep it flowing, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and share this with one person who only saw the Windsor highlight reels. I'll see you in the comments and in the next deep dive.